I'm Judge Penny Wolfgang, and welcome to The Big Picture. Reaction to recent elections continues. Has the balance of power changed, and what does it all mean to you? We'll find out from a top analyst. Niagara University honors some hometown heroes, including our friend Bishop Darius Pidgeon. We'll take you to this special event. And reporter Tony Farina connects with some prominent Italian Americans as they recognize hospitality icon Dennis DiPaolo. Right here, right now, on The Big Picture. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the program. Depending on who you talk to and what your political beliefs are, some thought that the recent midterm elections would shift the balance of power in Congress, and that despite millions more Democrats in New York State, that a Republican candidate might win the position of governor. Politics is still the talk of the town, so we went to seek some answers with Jack O'Donnell, a respected analyst at his home office in Buffalo. Welcome to political strategist Jack O'Donnell for a rundown, a post-election rundown, almost post-election, since some elections are still undecided, I guess, somewhere, as we know. But let's talk about Kathy Hochul, because it's very, very, I guess, momentous in many senses that she won this election, and not only because being the first woman governor, but all the other factors that were brought up and that made it seem like it was going to be a close race, but it really wasn't.
Absolutely. First woman, first person from Western New York in 100 years to be elected governor.
100 years?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. Oh my gosh.
She came in during difficult circumstances, right? Replaced a somewhat popular governor at different times in unfavorable circumstances. She's accomplished a lot. It was a big win for her. I think she should be very proud, and Western New York should be proud of her too.
I was just going to say that. Now, you think it's going to be significant for us in Western New York, aside from the obvious you just talked about, but you think her being, we already know how she's helped the Bills Stadium, for example. You think there'll be other issues and places where she can help Western New York?
Absolutely. I think we've already seen some of that, right? You mentioned the Bills, but she also has come up with money for the East Side and the train station, the Albright Knox Art Gallery, the Buffalo Zoo, the Philharmonic. More importantly, having someone who understands how we live and how the struggles that people go through in Western New York. This announcement of Micron, which is the computer fab thing in Syracuse, that's going to help us too, and those investments are going to matter for all of upstate.
Now, what do you think were the issues that in the whole election, but especially, for example, with the governor and in New York, what were the issues that really determined how people were going to vote, or did they just vote by party?
Well, there was certainly a mix, right? Crime was certainly a hot issue, and that's one of the reasons Zeldin, made this as close a race as he did. Hochul, I think maybe didn't talk enough about some of the economic development, job, dealing with the economy as she could. Obviously, she really tried to paint Lee Zeldin as a Trump acolyte and someone who didn't support democracy. And I think those things were enough in a democratic state.
And what do you think, John asked me to say, do you think people now vote, or ask, I should say, a party line or for the person?
Well, I think it's a mix. If you look at the registration of what people voted, we'll have more in-depth analysis of this over the next few weeks. But a number of Democrats voted for Lee Zeldin, a number of independents voted for Lee Zeldin, and some Republicans voted for Kathy Hochul. Maybe not as many, but there's definitely some party switching and crossing there. We saw beyond New York, we saw a lot of places where people split their ticket. In Pennsylvania, a Democratic governor was elected, and helped bring in the senator. But in Wisconsin, we had a Democratic governor and Republican senator. So, you do see some of that.
Mm-hmm. Everybody had great expectations. I mean, the pundits, the pollsters, the party people, that because it's a midterm election, the House would definitely become overwhelmingly, I don't know, you kept hearing 30 seats, I don't know, and the Senate maybe too. But did it turn out that way?
It hasn't yet. There's still some races to be counted in the House to see what the final numbers are. Still a couple seats outstanding in the Senate, and we're going to have this runoff election in December in Georgia, which may be the tiebreaker. So there's still more to be said on that, but overall, the big red wave didn't happen. Democrats held their own in a lot of places.
And why? I mean, do you think it was a matter, was it Biden? Did he help? Was it the issues that we talk about? Was it just party voting?
I think candidates matter, campaigns matter, right? We see, and we heard this from Senator Mitch McConnell, the leader of the Republicans in the U.S. Senate. Candidates matter, and we saw a lot of Republicans get through these primaries, many of them endorsed by Donald Trump, who were weaker candidates, and they paid that price both in the House and in the U.S. Senate.
So I heard that too, and I was going to ask you about that when Mitch McConnell said it was the quote unquote quality of the candidates. Do you agree with that?
I absolutely agree with that. A candidate who's not Herschel Walker probably would have gotten 50% in Georgia. Right. A candidate who had lived in Pennsylvania for the last couple of years probably would have won in Pennsylvania. We'd be having a very different conversation today if they had those candidates.
What about the future now? What do you see happening? Well, you don't know. We don't know what's going to happen.
We don't know what's going to happen. I think most expectation is that the Republicans may have, I don't know, somewhere between a 5 and 12 seat majority in the House, which is, it can be tough to control things that way. By all indications, it looks like there'll be 50 Republicans and 49 Democrats going into that runoff in December. I like Warnock's chances. Again, that's a place where people split their ballots. Kemp, the Republican candidate for governor, won a sizable victory, and yet it was neck and neck on the U.S. Senate. Without that to pull Walker through, I kind of like Warnock's chances, and we'll be back at 50-50.
Oh, do you think people are sick of talking about politics and elections, and have they had enough of it?
Absolutely. I think a lot of people are sick of talking about it. I think they're really sick about hearing about it, seeing the mailers and the attack ads on TV. I think they're frustrated with it, and I think they're right to be frustrated with it. But it's incumbent on the people in this business to do a better job and win their confidence.
However, this was an amazing turnout, wasn't it, from everywhere for midterm elections?
And just because people are frustrated, I think they're frustrated because they care. I think they're frustrated because they're worried. I think they're frustrated because they want to see things go differently. They're just two very different versions of what those changes look like, and we haven't agreed. But look, that's how the system was set up, right? That's what the founding fathers intended, that you shouldn't make change until you can get that consensus. So, it's frustrating, and these close margins can be frustrating to people, but it's the system working.
And also, I've been meaning to ask you, not being a pollster, but being involved with polls all the times. So, were they right? Were they wrong? Were they close?
Look, most of the, what I would call reputable pollsters, right, especially in New York, a lot of these public polls, the Siena, the Quinnipiac, they did pretty well in a lot of these races, even on the statewide race. What we've seen is this new factor where a lot of private groups or campaigns will release their own polls, right? They may have juiced the poll, they may have overestimated turnout, and then those things get aggregated, and suddenly it looks like in this Real Clear Politics average, people are winning or the race has changed. I think if you take those out and look at the real reputable polls, they were pretty close to spot on.
They said that they weren't, in the last election, everyone was saying, oh, the pollsters were wrong, they were wrong. But they weren't really. It turned out, like you just said, they were pretty close,
Yeah, same way, anything else. You've got to find the right vendor, the right survey, and usually they're good at this.
Were there any surprises that you feel in the local races that you could talk about?
Yeah, I don't think there were a lot of surprises. A lot of these races really kind of went true to form and registration. One of the most interesting, we had the two incumbent state senators running against each other, Sean Ryan and Ed Rath. two incumbent senators is kind of unusual. But that ended up being a little closer, perhaps, than you would have guessed on the registration. And Ed Rath ran a good campaign, but Sean Ryan won that handily. The assembly races, we had some at-risk members of the Democratic majority here: Karen McMahon, Monica Wallace, Pat Burke. But they ended up winning and winning handily. Number one, they got resources from Albany and the campaign committee and the speaker, which helped. But also, they didn't have the same experience in redistricting. So a judge has thrown out or has ordered the assembly to draw new lines. So they may still change, but not in time for this election. So they got the districts they wanted, and the results showed. If there was one other race that I think was interesting locally, it was the county clerk race. The Erie Democrats put an awful lot of resources in trying to beat Mickey Kearns in the Democratic primary, and they did. But it wasn't enough to overcome, his strength here in a general election. He got votes from Democrats, votes from independents, votes from Republicans. That was a pretty big win.
That's an example of what we talk about before and often, voting for the person, not the party line. He's a perfect example of that.
Absolutely. It matters, right? If people like you, know you, and respect the job you've done. But also, we saw him all summer at events, at parades, at Juneteenth, at the, Pride Parade. He was there in force, and people saw him, and it worked out for him.
We thank Jack O'Donnell for his time and expertise. When we come back, recognizing some hometown heroes.